Welcome to Brett Davis Unleashed. I'm Brett Davis, coming to you from beautiful Coronado, California, at IQ Podcast at Attorney King Studios. Man, I'll tell you, I'm excited at a chance to finally get a guy named John Little, who's somebody that I've admired for a long time, read many of his books, and he was almost mythical. I didn't really know what to expect. And his eyes are going bigger, and he's very humble. John, it's good to see you finally.
It's good to meet you as well there, officially today, Brett.
I know we've talked on the phone, but I mean, now I get to actually see you.
Yeah. Well, I hope your camera lens doesn't break.
Well, if it survived me, then it should be okay for you. So tell me, John, what did you ever realize that you were going to be a writer? I mean, tell me about where you grew up and what you thought you were going to do when you were a kid.
Oh, man. Well, depending on what era of my youth you're looking at, I had many different things. I was going to have my own martial arts school. Thought that would just be awesome. And then when bodybuilding came into my life, I decided I was going to own a gym, sort of Canada's answer to Gold's Gym. And then reality set in as I got older, and I thought, well, you're not going to get anything unless you go to school. So went to university, and upon graduating, I was fortunate to meet Chris Lund, who used to take a lot of the photographs for Joe Weider's magazine and Bob Kennedy's magazine back in the day. And he asked me if I could write some articles for his magazine, which was based in England at the time. So I started to do that, and I got into writing quite by accident. The articles went on for about 2 or 3 years. I wrote these articles for Chris, most of it on high intensity training, because Mike Mentzer had sort of dropped off the scene. There was no voice of high intensity training in the bodybuilding publications at that point. This would have been the mid 80s. And that caught the attention of Joe Weider, who sort of cornered me at an event and said, I want you to come to California and write for me. And I declined the invitation initially. But then we had a recession that hit in Canada in about 1992. And I thought, well, sunny California and a steady paycheck looked pretty good. So I called Joe and asked if his invitation was still open, and it was. And we went to California.
Wow. Just like that.
Just like that. Yeah. It was not a case of, conceive, believe, and achieve. It was a complete happenstance. I just happened to write articles that had a bit of a following, fortunately. And Joe Weider picked up on that and decided that he could use my writing to serve his benefit in California. So that's what I did.
It was quite a compliment, because he wasn't a bad writer himself. And I mean, he knew really good talent. I mean, he wouldn't just hire anybody. Joe
didn't write much himself, to my knowledge, but he did have some good writers. I mean, people from the past, like Rick Wayne, obviously, Jack Neary, who was probably my favorite writer for Weider. Mike Mentzer was a very good writer. Peter McGuff was another good writer. He was a colleague.
I like Peter a lot. Peter's amazing.
Yeah, he was my colleague at Flex, actually. We went to Flex at the same time. So he was about a couple cubicles up from me, but we used to hang out quite a bit. Back in the day.
Well, it hasn't been that long, has it?
Yeah, I left Weider employ in 1996.
So you were there how many ways? 6 years?
Yeah, I was there about 6 years, yeah. And then I worked for the Bruce Lee estate for a period of time and edited a lot of Bruce's remaining notes into books and things like that. But again, I was fortunate because I had an abiding interest in bodybuilding, but I also had, an even longer interest dating back to Bruce Lee when I first saw Enter the Dragon in the movie theaters, back in
great movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love all your books, by the way, that you've done on. How many books have you done on Bruce?
I was thinking about that the other day. I think altogether there's about 12, actually.
I was going to say, there's quite a many. There's a lot.
Yeah, but and the cool thing about those books were that it was all Bruce's writings for the most part that I was putting together. So it wasn't like, oh, here's this dude's opinion of what Bruce Lee was like. It was actually his communique, and I just sort of fashioned the platform or the vehicle through which he could communicate with a new generation of fans.
What separates a superstar that comes around once in a while, like a Steve Reeves or Bruce Lee? There's something special about them in their own ways, isn't there?
There is. I mean, obviously there's a lot of reasons why they came to our attention. The fruits that they bore were the results of a very dedicated approach to what they did. I mean, Bruce Lee in particular, I've never encountered a human being that was so dedicated to his craft. But I think there's also a very strong genetic component to it, because you and I have both known bodybuilders who weren't shy about giving their all in the gym and went religiously, but they never produced the results. We've all known martial artists that train diligently and without fail for decades, and they never come close to being what Bruce Lee was. So I think, there's a genetic component in virtually everything human, from our height to our eye color to our aptitude for certain sports and athletic events. And when that aptitude meets that activity, you get something special. And then when you pour into that the supplemental training and the discipline, it becomes even more special. But I have to think that genetics is a major factor. And it's not one that's talked about a lot, because, as you know, in the bodybuilding industry, and to a lesser extent in the martial arts industry, it's a commercially driven enterprise. And it's really hard to turn a buck on genetics.
I mean, unless you start getting into more genetically modified type stuff that involve injections and.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's going on though.
Yeah, there's more and more of that going on, and of course, steroids in the case of bodybuilding can alter your genetic potential to a large extent. But it's again, if these people have that leg up on the average person to excel at certain types of activities, and they happen to, through happenstance, come into contact with those activities and embrace them, then you get something really special. And in the case of Steve Reeves, clearly he had that. And in the case of Bruce Lee, he clearly had that. So it's.
I see photos of Steve's father, and Steve's father had quite a physique himself.
He told me that, he said, my father's shoulder to waist differential is the same as mine. And he said, and he never lifted a weight in his life. And I know, as a personal trainer, you have all stripes of clients that come in and out of your facility, on an annual basis. And I had a fellow who was 66 years old. He had an 18.5-inch calf. Never did a calf raise in his life for it. That's genetics, muscle fiber density, how many fibers you have in a given inch of muscle. Whereas, let's say I have, pick a number, 100,000. He may have 400,000. So when those fibers hypertrophy as a result of training, his will always be 4 times larger than mine, because you can't stimulate into growth fibers that aren't there.
It's almost like having a powerful engine in an automobile. It's already there. It's in place.
Yeah.
With that being said, can a person, even though that person like that does have a leg up? I mean, there's been people like Franco Columbu and people like that. I mean, of course, they use probably anabolics.
Right.
They were able to turn an average body, and they really didn't have the greatest genetics, but and even Zayn in some ways. I mean, he turned something. I mean, he had a great physique, but I mean, I always had problems with his calves. He was able to do some things to develop him differently, thought differently outside the box, and not that would have kept him from being a Mr. Olympia or a classic physique, but they found ways to become greater.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at pictures of Frank Zane when he was, let's say, pre-steroids, and they're like old pictures, you can look at his physique and say, I don't know that he was on steroids. Again, genetically, some people just respond to it better than others. Right. I've known people that have taken steroids and you never know it, and I've known other people that took it and you didn't recognize them in 2 months. So Frank had the right lines. Clearly that much is evident. And then when he built his physique, fortunately for him, perhaps directly as a result of his approach to training or just his genetics, those muscle groups all grew larger in proportion to one another. So his symmetry was tremendous. It still, in many respects, remains the gold standard in bodybuilding. So for that. Franco, a little different. I mean, again, you can look at shots of Franco before he came over to America in some of his earlier competitions. And I mean, I don't know that you would have him cracking the top 6 in a bodybuilding contest. But, you know, the anabolics and coming over to America and maybe trying some different techniques to help bring up certain body parts worked very well for him, certainly.
Sure.
But yeah, it's weird. I mean, to me, I've grown so cynical with bodybuilding over the past 20 years that I don't even follow it. I mean, I couldn't tell you who the current Mr. Olympia is. And, you know, more to the point, if you were to leave your studio right now and stop the first person you meet on the street and ask them who Mr. Olympia is, they don't know. Nobody knows, and fewer people even care about it. It seems to be a thing from our youth. And don't get me wrong, I think having a well-muscled physique and being in shape and fit and everything is great. But, you know, the Emperor's New Clothes was revealed on this sport many, many decades ago. And, you know, back in the 70s and the early 80s, we didn't know really about steroids or the extent of its use. And then the Seoul Olympics broke with Ben Johnson, and suddenly steroids came to the forefront. And then we saw it everywhere else. And we noticed that it was more than a coincidence that those that were taking these drugs all looked like bodybuilders. Who was a baseball player for the Oakland Athletics, Ricky, base stealing guy.
Henderson?
Yeah, great physique. Also took steroids. You know,
that I didn't know.
Yeah, well, and same with his teammate who was Jose Canseco. You know,
and McGuire.
Yeah, and McGuire and all these guys. But if you look at him, I was like, holy crap, these guys look like bodybuilders. And you don't need to look like a bodybuilder to play baseball, but they did because, you know, by then the whole fitness culture and everything had infiltrated all the sports and the movie. Everybody had to look like a professional bodybuilder. But you look at the guys that held records for decades and decades, like Babe Ruth. You would never enter a bodybuilding contest. You know, clearly you don't need to have a 20-inch arm to hit a baseball or to have the type of savvy that you need to play the game well. So, in my opinion, I think bodybuilding, unfortunately, has gone back to how it was perceived by the public pre-pumping iron. After pumping iron, it was this wonderful activity and enterprise, and you could control how you looked by, you know, doing the right exercise to, you know, so-called chisel your biceps, or you know, Arnold's analogy of the sculptor with the clay. And I mean, I bought into that. I thought that was great, but clearly my clay was defective. You know, I never looked like Arnold, and in retrospect, apart from genetics, I know why I didn't look like Arnold now. But the hard part, I think, for some of us from that era is letting go of the dream. You know, we all wanted to be big muscle men. I remember Mike Mentzer at a seminar saying, well, you know, has anybody gained too much muscle this year? You know, has anybody gained so quickly that it bothered them or disturbed them? And he said, no, because muscle growth is a slow process. Anybody that trains knows how slow it is. He said, but you've come here today and you've shelled out your money because you're hoping that maybe I can share a secret or two with you that'll get you growing. He said, because we all want to be big muscle men. And then he paused and said, a very lofty goal indeed. So Mike was dry. I mean, he had a very dry sense of humor. But, you know, now the older I get, the more I come to share that viewpoint, you know, that in some respects, I mean, and again, I'm clearly conflicted on this. Part of me loves it, loves the activity. I love training. If I can coax out a little bit of growth, I'm deliriously happy. But the other part of me sees it as the most ridiculous enterprise on the face of the earth. Imagine me saying, I have the world's biggest hand. Look at that. Look at that hand right there. Right? You know, I've been working on that hand for. I mean, what does that mean? You know, and so why should your bicep be any different than that? You know, I've got the biggest biceps. Oh, okay, good for you. You know, isn't that wonderful? You know, cap. But you know, it's to have a swollen, you know, body part, which is very temporary, because once you're off the drugs and if you're not training the exact same manner you were when you were building it, it goes away. Look at the bodybuilders from Pumping Iron when they did that reunion. They re-released the movie on DVD or something a few years ago, and they had all the guys that appeared in the film, they all look like geriatrics from a nursing home. You know, you'd never pick one of those guys as being, you know, a champion bodybuilder, because it just, for whatever reason, it didn't carry into old age for these guys.
Do you think that has something to do with the way, I mean, we're talking apples and oranges, but there was a time where people that did, I kind of think what we believe in, physical culturist.
Yeah. That's the
difference between the two, right?
Yeah, big difference. Physical culture was sort of what was around in the Grimmick-Reeves era. And it was about being healthy, living a healthy lifestyle. And that included exercising and being the best that you could be from a health and strength standpoint. And then it got all about cosmetics, how you looked. And so if that was the goal, or that was the standard, it didn't really matter how healthy you were. I remember when I was covering bodybuilding contests for Joe, a bodybuilder dropping backstage and almost dying because he'd taken, what was
Diuretics?
it? Yeah, it was a diuretic or insulin. He'd taken insulin. So his blood sugar was like down by his toenails. So I rushed to a nearby pop machine, you know, and pumping change in there to get, you know, sugar beverages in and pouring it down his throat until the paramedics arrived. And then he went away, or he was taken away in an ambulance. And this was the prejudging. He came back about half an hour before the finals started. And he still had his hospital bracelet on his wrist. Wow. And competed. I think he got third place. But, you know, because he was there was no subcutaneous water between his muscles and his skin, he was immediately pulled aside to hold up a can of whatever Joe was hawking and give it the big thumbs up, you know, and even though he'd never seen that product before in his life. But here's a guy who almost died to get whatever this cosmetic look was. So clearly from a physical culture standpoint, he was at the other end of the spectrum, you know. But
how did you feel about that when you saw that? You never saw anything like that before, did you?
No. I was deeply disillusioned. I was disillusioned with the fact that this fellow had walked up to the line of death and almost fallen over it. And I was even more disillusioned by the industry that couldn't wait to push him in front of a camera to sell a product because of this freakish look that his near-death experience had produced. To me, it was like, what are we selling here? I remember, again, going out to California, and I was naive, right? I mean, I was writing my articles, you know, from the safety of my room in Canada here, and looking into physiology textbooks about how muscles stimulated and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I was led to believe that there was a Weider research clinic out there. So I thought, man, this is going to be the best. You know, I'm going to be picking the brains of these science people out there about health and strength and how to build muscle. And, you know, to my shock, of course, there was no Weider research clinic. There never was. Someone once said it was a broom closet at Joe's office, but it had nothing to do with your health or your fitness, except by association. You know, you went to a gym, you worked out, and that was good for you. The whole purpose of the whole thing was to sell you products, supplements. And, you know, as Mike pointed out numerous times, he said, you know, supplements were intended to be added to a diet that was imbalanced. Or, for example, if you are lactose intolerant, you can't get calcium from cheese or milk, take a calcium supplement. That was their original purpose. But somehow the public has got it into their minds that they are going to get super health or extend their longevity by some period of time because they're taking some supplement. And indeed, the research would show quite the opposite. And actually, in my book, The Time Savers Workout, I reveal some studies that show that even if you take a high potency multivitamin mineral tablet, which seems pretty innocuous, you can increase your chances of early death by doing this, according to the scientific literature.
What do you think about that? Do you believe that?
Yeah, I do believe it, because I think, you know, our bodies evolved to be able to process foods that we could readily find available in nature. There shouldn't be big natural impediments to getting the nutrition we need to survive out of nature. And, you know, if you need to take it from a vitamin E gel cap, you don't see too many vitamin E gel cap bushes growing out in the wild. You know, this is a man-made, man-constructed entity that they are selling you. And they like to sell it to you because you're going to need more of it in 30 days' time because it's a renewable resource. And to get the equivalent that I've read somewhere of the amount of vitamin E, for example, that you need to take, you'd have to have like 80 pounds of walnuts or something, or almonds. Well, if you couldn't survive, if our species couldn't survive unless we got access to 80 pounds of almonds on a daily basis, we wouldn't have survived. So I think a lot of their merits are overstated for commercial purposes. And their biggest market, no surprise, are the young, I put 15 to 21-year-olds who are so desperate to change the way they look that they will do anything. And I mean, I was the same way. I was as gullible as anyone else. I used to buy desiccated liver tablets because Vince Gironda said you had to have 50 a day. So lo and behold, I'm shoveling, desiccated liver tablets into my mouth throughout the day and taking vitamin E capsules or tablets and vitamin C and vitamin B for stress and all of this sort of stuff. All I did really was turn my urine a richer shade of yellow, and my pocketbook went down like that when I was doing it. And and again, I always pull back and try and look at it realistically. And the thing is, drug companies, think of them what you will, but one thing that can't be denied is that they have big budgets. And what they do with this R&D budget is they raid the universities, particularly the biochemistry students, and they look for the brightest minds, because that's where the next breakthrough drug is going to come from, is these people's knowledge of biochemistry. And any drug company would cut you a large portion of their shares if you could come up with an energy booster or a fat burner or something that is going to allow you to live longer, to increase longevity. To date, despite dropping 20, 30 million a year in R&D, not one of them has come up with this. So if they haven't, using the brightest minds and the big pockets and everything else, what are the odds that some guy with a P.O. box in Biloxi, Mississippi has cracked the nut on these things?
God. So do you think that all supplements are bad? I mean, do food-based vitamins, are they better than things that have been heated with a lot?
Bad on principle. I mean, I'm sure there will be exceptions, and I do not possess exhaustive knowledge on each and every supplement under each and every manufacturer's label to offer, a sweeping generalization as I just have. But by and large, I look at the branch is not divorced from the root, and the root of all supplements came out of commercialism. It didn't come out of giving a damn about your health or anything else. And any bodybuilder I've met that's gotten into the supplement industry is looking at the dollar sign. How much money can you make? They don't do research. They don't have to. That's part of the beauty of the supplement is you can claim whatever you want for your product. It's not, you don't have to.
And it's different in Canada than it is the United States.
Yeah, it probably is. But to me, an apple's an apple, a supplement's a supplement. If you, I try and eat a balanced diet, but, human beings are a funny species because we've evolved over eons to be able to take almost anything we could find in nature and turn it into almost anything we needed. That's what our metabolisms are like. Now, if you have a deficiency or you can't process certain macronutrients or micronutrients, absolutely take a supplement. No argument for me on that. But it's when you're taking it to build something beyond what you are intrinsically that I have a problem, because that has never been established. And usually if someone takes a supplement and let's say they put an inch on their arms, they're also taking steroids. So what's the variable here? Which one do you think is the more likely culprit for producing that strong a physiologic change? In medicine, there is a belief, well supported, that the side effects of a drug are equal to its therapeutic effect. So if you've got a real problem and you take a really strong drug in order to treat that problem, you're probably going to have a really strong side effect. And if you have a very low side effect, you have a very low therapeutic benefit. Well, nobody has side effects from supplements they take. So what is the potency of these things? apart from, abdominal cramping, depending on what you're taking, So, I recognize that these are not popular views, certainly not in an industry that generates billions of dollars, literally $6-7 billion a year in the supplement industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's what drives the fitness industry, because when I was working for Flex magazine, they were selling like ads, and it was at the peak at that point where you could get $24,000 for an ad in like a one-page ad in Joe Weider's magazine. $24,000 you'd have to pay for that. So
what was the subscription? Was the subscription around at that time?
God, I don't know. I never subscribed, but yeah, it was dear. I mean, you paid quite a bit for it, but
$24,000 for one advertisement.
I want to advertise my podcast in a full-page ad in Muscle and Fitness in 1995. It would cost you $24,000
a month.
Yep.
Wow.
So
things have changed a lot, haven't they?
But consequently, if you're an editor or you're Joe Weider of this magazine, and a guy who pays for 3 ads a month out of your magazine contacts you and says, you know what? Excuse me, Brett. We'd like a little more coverage of our product in your magazine. We'd like an article that's written about it, promoting it. You're going to get the article, because this is a business at the end of the day.
Right.
And keeping you happy and keeping your $75K coming in every month means compromising my journalistic integrity. There was no, it's like Groucho Marx said, these are my principles. If you don't like them, I've got others, and excuse me. So I remember that Flex magazine at one point, at the end of the year, had turned, I think, a gross profit of about $2 million, which is, it's a lot of money. But one of their advertisers was in for $2 million a year, which means 2 things. One, those guys who were selling the supplements were making far in excess of $2 million a year in order to justify their marketing expenditure there. And number 2, if they pulled the ad out, that magazine then went into the red. So keeping the advertisers happy is priority number 1. And as you know, there's no shortage of bodybuilders in Southern California. So if some bodybuilder, for example, Mike Mentzer, said, I'm not going to promote that because I don't think it's necessary, that's okay. See you, Mike, because we can open up a new can of bodybuilders who are willing to promote it. And the only reason I feel strongly about it is because I was an idiot when I was younger. I believed it from the outside looking in. I believed what I was told because it was in the magazines. And that hasn't changed. It's still the same.
So there apparently is a challenge with bodybuilding, like you said, from when we grew up. And I think the 80s, actually, in the 90s, probably were the best of the best years in my mind. As far as marketing and it being cool and the hip thing and the movies. And
yeah, it had ridden the wave. I think the pumping iron started for public acceptance. And the 80s were the boom years. Yeah.
Right. But I'll be honest with you. I think we got off course where we were more cosmetic going into this thing in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even more so now. We lost touch with the physical culturist. Is it possible they say history can repeat itself, or trends or classics always come back? Is there a chance that the physical culture mentality can come back?
Yeah, I think
is it gone?
Natural reaction. If you push the pendulum too far in one direction, it swings back to the other direction almost of its own inertia. So, there's too much that is demonstrably valuable and true in the physical culture approach, and the fact that it's been pushed aside so that the cosmetic component can assume center stage for as long as it has, doesn't mean that the pendulum isn't going to swing back the other way. People will get tired of, all sizzle and no steak pretty soon. And once people take their health seriously, I think they've already become physical culturists in that respect. So I mean, what I've tried to do, it's questionable how successful I've been at advancing it, but is to try and focus on making resistance training an adjunct to your life, not the reason for your life. And it takes into account the fact that whatever gains we can get, however great or small, there's a genetic factor to it that we are not going to alter through training. But that's okay. That accepting, the reality of the situation is a good thing. Excuse me. But once you do sort of embrace that mindset, the idea that, I'm just going to go into the gym more often because I'm going to push an even further level of adaptation. Well, you can't. The ceiling's there. So doing more work isn't going to result in more gain. Doing more work is going to result in more wear and tear on your joints. And I use this example quite a bit, that the hinge joints in your elbows and your knees are not that dissimilar to the hinge joints in that door behind me. And you have a lifetime of normal use built into both of them. So you're going to exercise, which means you're going to increase the amount of times that door is opening and closing behind you. Now you can increase it a lot, or you can increase it a little bit. We want the benefits from strength training and physical culture, if you will. We'd like to minimize the negative stuff, the wear and tear. But if you do, like you ride a bicycle, let's say, as your form of exercise, as some people do, because it's not that muscularly demanding, especially if you're riding on a flat surface, you can do it for a long time. You can do it for an hour, at least. But if you're doing it for an hour, you're going to open and close those hinge joints in your knee 20,000 times. So that's like me going to that door, opening and closing it 20,000 times over and above the normal use it gets 4 or 5 days a week. So when you're younger, when you're in your 20s, when you're in your teens, maybe even into your 30s, your cells regenerate fairly rapidly and you're bulletproof comparatively. But, once you get into your 50s, like I am, you're a well-preserved 50. But that just doesn't happen. So driving up or subjecting my joints to wear and tear that I'm not going to recover from serves no benefit to me. I want to get stronger, I want to maintain my strength, but I don't want to be arthritic in the process of trying to preserve that. So that's why I've always been more inclined to look again to bodybuilding or strength training as an adjunct to your life. How little do you need, not how much can you tolerate, and once
like sprinting to long distance running.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can see with some of the studies that come out of the universities regarding high intensity interval training that in that case, the aerobic benefit is the equal of longer sessions performed for a greater volume. Well, that's good news, because if I don't have to do the 20,000 revolutions on the bicycle pedal, I save on wear and tear quite a bit. But again, I want to preserve strength. I want to preserve what cardiovascular benefit I can at my age. And I find that with proper resistance training, I get a check mark in both boxes. And I don't need to become a slave to my art. I don't have to be in there 6-7 days a week. I can do it once a week, and I'm quite happy with that. And
you know what it sounds like you just said?
What?
It sounds like you just came up with the 4-hour work week for resistance training.
Well, it's not even the 4 hour. I mean, I'm embarrassed to tell you how little my training sessions are.
How long are your sessions?
7 minutes.
7 minutes.
Yeah.
Crystal, did you hear that, Crystal? He works out 7 minutes. He works out 7 minutes and he's done.
Yeah.
This is like perfect for executives.
That's me as well, though, right? I have no desire at 59 to be in the gym 7 days a week. I have no interest in it. It doesn't interest. It's not a cool place to hang out. If I'm not that in need of social companionship that I need to haunt the gymnasium. But
so how many total minutes or hours you work out for less than an hour a week?
Yeah. If a couple of times during COVID, I've been creative when I've worked out, and I've went and did one sort of like a circuit through every machine in my gym, which is, I think, 16 machines. But I only did a 30-second interval on each one, so that's 8 minutes. And that, that to me was a long workout. So
you look great. You look great. And what do you do as far as cardio?
nothing.
No cardio at all.
No.
Yeah. What about your nutrition?
At the end of my workout. No, believe me, I'm the complete antithesis of of probably everything you believe, unfortunately. But it's no, my diet is not regulated. I mean, if I need to lose body fat, which I probably do now because I've been slothful during COVID, I just tighten up on my food intake. But no, hell no. COVID's been a party for me. I've been eating whatever I want, beer every night.
You look great.
Well, we did talk about the cosmetic thing, right?
Okay, well, I'm sure you didn't get anything done, but my training typically is no more than 4 hours a week. That's cardio and weights. I try to do every other day. I do cardio on its own, usually a circuit. It's not a circuit, but an interval of 20 minutes, no more, no less. Mm-hmm. And I increase the level 1 on the stationary bike, 1 level every minute.
Right.
I work from 12 to 15, go backwards. I'm done in 20 minutes. But I feel great. I haven't had any major health problems.
Yeah.
I try to eat as clean as I can.
Well, the thing is, too, I'm not judging anyone else's approach to fitness. That just happens to be mine.
Sure. Well, I'd like to work out less, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if people like working out, and I get that from people, they'll sit down and they're intrigued by once a week or shorter workouts, and I'll go through all the analogies and the science and blah, blah, blah. And at the end of it, I'm met with a blank stare, usually, and a statement that says, but I like working out. Well, I've got no answer for that. If psychologically you feel you have to be in the gym, fill your boots. But physiologically, I haven't seen that. I mean, we've been training clients now, Lord, for 16 years. We average between 25 and 35 a day. So that's how many workouts we've supervised. 6 days a week. Excuse me, something about my coffee is getting to me. And initially we trained people twice a week. And we did 6 to 7 machines. Workouts lasted on the order of about 20 minutes. And then we got this machine called a bod pod. I don't know if you ever heard of them. They look like a space capsule, like from Mork. And
is that the one you do the body fat?
It tests composition. And
I've actually used it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing, and the studies that have been done with it put it on par or just below hydrostatic weighing, which is kind of the gold standard of composition. Right. I think it's an error percentage of plus minus 0.5% or something, shy of an autopsy. It's about as good as it gets. So once we got this, it was like a new toy. We couldn't play with it enough.
It's very interesting.
Let's try training protocols and let's experiment with frequency. And so what we did with our clients is we said, listen, we got this toy, essentially. So why don't you guys come in and we're going to check your composition, every member of the gym, which at that point was, I think we had 200 members then. And then the next day come in and work out, and we're going to test your composition again. And then I don't want you to work out for 2 weeks, but I want you to come in every single day so we can track what, if any, changes occur in your body composition. And so that's what we did, because I was looking for, when after a workout, on average, does the benefit show up? Because if it shows up 3 days later, there's no point training on the second day or the day after the workout. So let's really test this. So we did that. And after this 2-week interval, we looked at all the data. We threw it down on the table and looked at it. And like most things that have a genetic component, there was a bell curve. So 86.5% of all of the clients did not produce any benefit from a workout session in terms of an increase in lean muscle tissue until 6.6 days, call it a week, 7 days. And we had outliers, not a lot, but we had outliers where some people were good to go after 4 days. Other people, it was 2 weeks. I was 10 days. I remember that.
Wow.
So, yeah. So for me to work out on day 5 arbitrarily because I can't keep out of the gym, all I would have done was auger a deeper hole for myself, because the cycle is sort of, here's your lean, and then you do a workout and the lean drops immediately. Glycogen gets burned up, the water that bonds to glycogens gets flushed out, and then over the next 3 or 4 days it tracks back up to where it was. And if you wait a little bit longer, it builds up a little bit. But that build up, that adaptation can be anywhere from 7 days to 14 days after you train, or 4 days if you're really a quick responder. So what was kind of cool about our facility was we train regular folks. We don't have Olympic athletes. We don't have the genetically blessed. We have the genetically bereft. And
there's more of those.
Yeah, well, there is. And so this had relevance to most people. That 86.5% bell curve, those are our guys. And so we shared that with them and said, hey, you guys don't need to train twice a week anymore. What we're seeing here is that once a week is going to do it. And a lot of people really relieved to hear that, because they had busy lives. Some were single parents. They had other obligations that demanded their time. And then we had other people that felt that was a real ripoff. You're going to charge me to work out and I can only come in once a week? What kind of jip is this? And needless to say, those that were so closed-minded to the science or to what we had revealed didn't stay with us much longer. But other ones did, and more came in that were attracted to the idea that they didn't have to live their lives in the gym in order to make progress. So that's kind of endured to this day.
I find everything you always say fascinating. I feel like I'm back in college, by the way, but we're about the same age. You're 25 though, right? Now, how old were you?
Yes. 25. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, vaguely. But,
then you were 25.
At one point. Yeah. Back in the day.
So you're 55?
59. Be 60 in December. Yeah.
I'll be 56 in December.
You're a pup.
I know I am.
You're a young pup.
But I look forward to learning more from you. And can you name a couple good books? You got a lot of them, but 2 of your newest books out that people should go out and check them out, read them.
Well, if any of your viewers or listeners are having trouble sleeping, I would recommend they pick up the Time Savers Workout if they would like to learn more about our approach of very brief and infrequent and intense training.
Okay.
That would be, it offers, I think, my more mature viewpoint on the subject, whereas some of my earlier books, I was too effusive with thinking I'd really cracked a nut on this thing. And then I kind of realized that the protocol per se is not the determining factor in success, unlike what I believed at one point. I used to believe that the more intense you train, the better the results, clearly. But even intensity has a point of diminishing returns. And all you can, too much intensity is almost like too much training. You can set up a situation where you have to recover for a protracted period of time, which is not necessary or desirable.
We'll have to talk about that on another show, because that's a whole different area.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting area, by the way.
Yeah. No, it is. It's fascinating, because, and I've also come to learn that it's okay to change your routine. You don't have to be done.
Sure.
You don't. In fact, it's probably a good and productive thing, because it kind of tricks your body's natural impulse to conserve energy. Once it figures out what you're doing and the sequence in which you're doing it, it immediately sets to work at trying to figure out a way to do it with less muscle fiber involvement and therefore less energy output. Which is the exact opposite of what you want if you're training to get stronger. You want more fiber involvement because you want to stimulate more fibers to get stronger. So, variety is not a bad thing. And
no, it's not.
Of any stripe almost can serve that purpose.
You have another book that you'd written out, and it was kind of a little bit different than anything you've done. Would you like to talk about that? Is that the Thomson True Crime?
Yeah, the Thomson book. It's interesting.
Different than anything you've done, huh?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. What's interesting is that my dad had written a book on this subject in 1970, but Tom Thomson, for the benefit of your listeners or viewers who don't follow Canadian art, and who would, was a landscape painter in Canada at the turn of the last century. And Canada didn't really have like an art school back then. They copied the European style. And Tom Thomson was the first artist to go out and actually go into the north and capture the wilds before there was settlement and things like that. And so he, you know, in the fall, the colors were spectacular, and he opened up a whole new vista for even Canadians who hadn't been to that part of the world. Anyway, Tom Thomson turned up dead one day, and right away the people started asking questions about it, like, what the hell happened to this guy? He was a tremendous canoeist, lived by himself in the bush like for months on end every year. He was an amazing swimmer who could swim the breadth of this very large lake that was there. And he was very familiar with the lake that he happened to be on the day that he disappeared. But his overturned canoe was found about an hour after he left the dock on a calm day, and his body came to the surface 8 days later. And there was a bruise on the left temple and fishing line wrapped suspiciously 17 times around his left ankle. But anyway, he was a nobody. His art hadn't taken off by then. There was no interest really in him. So he was just a guy who turned up dead in a lake one day, so they quickly buried him. But then a whole comedy of errors went through. It was the family asked for his body to be exhumed and taken back to the family plot about 100 miles away. And an undertaker showed up to do the job at about 10 o'clock at night. And in this part of the world, I don't know where it's like where you are, but here we have these terrible insects called mosquitoes and black flies that love to hang around in July. And the area where this guy would have done the job of exhuming the body was right in the middle of swamps and lakes. It was just a haven for these things. So they would have eaten them alive. But he dismissed everybody that was with him, said, I'll do this job on my own. So an undertaker left alone, 10 o'clock at night with a shovel is said to have dug down 6 feet, lifted up an oak casket 6 feet, and then removed this terribly decomposed body, put it in a metal casket, soldered the metal casket for transport, reburied the oak casket, all in about 3 hours. So nobody who lived up there believed he did the job. They believed he just took the money and soldered this casket, which he knew would never be open when it was taken to the family's plot.
Okay.
And anyway, my father was friends with the park ranger who was there when this went down. And he told my dad the story. And 40 years later, Dad went to the spot where Thomson's original grave was and dug down to see if there was anything there. And he found not only a casket, but a skeleton in a casket that was supposed to be empty. So that triggered big news all across Canada. And it sparked my interest when I was a kid. Obviously, I grew up with the story. So I poured over all of the information I could access now that my dad never had access to, and examined all the various theories as to how Thomson could have met his end and who could have killed him, and then ran it by police detectives who specialize in such things and said, what are your thoughts? And that was the premise of the book, Who Killed Tom Thomson?
It's fascinating.
It is an interesting story. Yeah.
It sounds like it should be a movie.
I agree with you. I think it would be a fascinating movie.
I agree. I think you need to find a way to get that turned into a movie for you.
Well, we'll keep knocking on doors, and eventually one will open, presumably. But
I have some friends. I have to let them know about the book, and then I also have another friend that wrote a book that I want to get a copy to. It's called Haboob Wind, and I'll tell you more about it at another time. But I appreciate your time. You're a busy guy, and you've got a lot going on, and well, I like we can visit you sometime and say hi and take you to lunch. That'd be cool.
All sounds good to me, as long as you don't mind drinking beer for lunch.
Okay, we'll have some beers and we'll talk. And if you got to come to San Diego one of these times.
Yeah, I haven't been to the States in a long time. I miss it. We lived in California for a while.
Our office is in Coronado, right by the Hotel Del.
Oh,
not too far from the Hotel Del.
We were there. We were in Woodland Hills. So there's a lot of parts of California I haven't seen, but every part I've visited, it's beautiful. So,
well, I look forward to having that beer with you.
Yeah, I say you're in God's country.
We are.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, John Little, for being on my show. I appreciate it. And
I appreciate
we have to talk again. Would you come on again sometime?
Happy to, Brett, anytime.
Okay, John, you take care of yourself. John Little. Take care.
You too. Take care.